I think that's
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, Ranjit sir. Is it audible?
Yeah, Nirmal, yeah. I'm
Good
King
morning.
also, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hi,
am I
King.
audible?
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Am I
audible.
audible? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, fine. Able to see each other. Ranjit sir, need a little light on your face.
I know. Just a sec. I think I'll have to change my place.
Sir, you should dye your hair, sir.
It's just that I lost the battle here.
Yeah, this is fine.
This is better?
Much better.
Okay. So I think Dr. Jesse has to come, right?
The systems are okay.
I hope so.
Sir, can you put the first slide? Present it and put the
Yes.
first slide.
So that should go in.
It's disabled by screen sharing
Okay.
is disabled right now.
So probably she might put it on, right?
Yeah.
Sir, if you share your screen, so once you share your screen, I think it will come.
Now it's coming. Okay. Is this visible?
Yes, it is. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see, where is the chat box? Question and answer.
Now, shall we? Oh, okay, 5 more minutes left, right?
Nimrod sir, you can share the link to those internet.
Sorry?
You can share that link on it, sir. This is the same one.
Okay, fine.
a very good morning to Nirmal sir and Ranjit Kumar sir.
Yeah, hi.
Morning,
Good
Dr.
morning,
Jesse.
Dr. Jesse. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. I'm fine.
So are we good to go, or are we waiting for some more?
Yeah, we
Oh,
are
waiting for
some
time.
more participants. Yes.
Okay, fine. You've been conducting webinars such as this, Dr. Jesse?
Yeah, we have been conducting since the lockdown.
Okay.
There are so many of the alumni, like Vivek Srivastav, and the 3 alumni have already conducted the webinars. And we have
Okay.
also conducted one webinar in association with National Commodities and Trade. They conducted a very good webinar, and then we conducted another webinar in association with Raghuraman sir. He is a wonderful motivation speaker. So we have this is our, I think this is our 7th webinar.
Okay,
Good.
good.
I think Amitabh Chatterjee sir also has.
Yeah, Amitabh
one
sir.
session.
I was just not able to recall his name. Yeah, Amitabh sir also was there. Indranoil Ganguly was also there. He was also one of the speakers. It was
Okay.
a very
Okay.
good session.
He was into HR, right? Indrani Ganguly. Sir.
No, he is into this ecology, and he is taking care of this afforestation and coming with new strategies in order to conserve biodiversity and things like that.
Okay, then I think I mixed it up with some other Indranil then.
Okay. He's actually did his PhD from abroad, I think University of Washington, and he's teaching there only.
Okay.
Making wonderful contribution in his ecological and local as well as international ecosystem.
Vivek also did, right? If I'm correct?
Yeah, Vivek
Srivastav?
Srivastav.
Yeah.
Vivek Srivastav. He took a webinar on retail management.
Yes.
It was also a very wonderful session wherein he was focusing on because students were really enthusiastic because he was focusing more on retail aspects.
Mm.
And many of the marketing students were really, it was they were asking so many questions and answers because majority of them are going into this retail space with respect to their career as well. At present we are having 22. Just give me 5 minutes more.
Sure.
That's fine. I mean, we are in no hurry.
And I would like to thank you for joining us on a holiday.
Okay.
Of course. Eid Mubarak to everybody.
Yeah. Is okay. Sorry, I just got a little confused. I thought you said holy, so I was wondering how come Holi came now?
Holiday.
Okay.
Ranjit sir just realized that it was a holiday today.
Yeah. Working from home, you lose track.
Or is the grey hair, sir?
Sorry?
Which one? Or is the grey hair?
Both.
We should meet Ranjit sir sometime. It's a long time.
Yeah, definitely. I know.
Staying in the same city, we are not able to meet up. It's really bad.
Be careful right now.
No, we'll come in car or only be in car from both the sides. We'll speak and then we'll leave.
So, Dr. Jesse, when does the semester start, or when do the children come to or students come to the institute?
Usually we used to start the session from the month of July, but because of this COVID situation, we are going to initiate the online classes from August 20th, after August 20th. And it is going to be a blended mode which we'll be practicing, online and offline combined.
Okay.
So this year's kind of admissions are already over.
It is still going on. The
So
situation is not that rosy this time.
I know. But how did you start the admission process? Was it through the MAT, or I think, what did we do?
Yes.
Normally, any idea?
Yeah.
MAT, right?
MAT,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Those days
Then we have got many students from southern part of India, like Karnataka, Andhra and all. And even students are there from Kerala as well in the new batch.
Students, okay.
Yeah, students from Kerala are also there.
So it now was it always IRM? I thought it was IIRM, right? When we passed
No,
out?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
passed out.
yeah. It was IIRM, but now it is IRM because based on an ordinance passed by Government of India, no private institution can use the keyword Indian.
Oh,
So
okay.
we
Okay.
were forced to remove the word Indian from from our nomenclature.
Okay.
I can see one Sandeep Sharma joined us as an attendee. I'm not sure whether it's my batchmate Sandeep or not. We passed some information to him as well.
How many ex-students are here? Any idea? No.
What's a
No.
Abhishek?
How
No
many
idea.
ex-students? No idea.
Because only the name has been reflected, so I will not be able to
I
make out
know,
all
I
the
know, I
names.
know. I understand. Yeah.
I think we can start by around 11:05.
Okay.
Already we are having more
And
than,
this is exactly an hour, right?
yeah, it is exactly an hour.
So by 12 o'clock, we have to wind up.
Yes, yes. And if
Okay.
you want to extend, you can extend. No issues from my side.
Okay. It all depends on how interested the students are. So if they have nothing to ask, then we have nothing to say either.
Look forward for a wonderful session because this is actually a topic wherein we have to focus upon because rural development and the resilience we have to showcase in order to emerge out of this particular pandemic situation. It is very much important.
True.
So I'm pretty
True,
much
true,
sure
true.
that it is going to be a wonderful session for the participants.
I hope so too. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we also thought that specifically for rural management students, and this is an area where they have to understand because tomorrow when they go to different organizations, so these kinds of ideas will help them nurture their own thought process.
Yes. Very true.
Kingshuk, you have muted yourself as well as switched off your webcam, is it?
I muted because there's some. I'm in office actually.
Oh, okay, okay. You told me. Yes, yes. You told us rather.
Mhm.
Can we start, sir? Because already we are, it is
Yes, yes.
11:05.
Yes.
Sure.
Let the other students join after. I think they will be joining. All at present, we have crossed around 50.
Yeah, that's fine. Let them join us and when they can.
So a very good morning to one and all present today. I appreciate the zeal and enthusiasm showcased by all of you to join this webinar, which is focusing upon the local economic development in the context of restructuring of rural India post-COVID. So before I initiate with today's webinar, I would like to introduce today's speakers to all of you. Our first speaker is going to be Nirmal Mandal, sir. He's having a background in economics and postgraduate in rural management. He has got more than 17 years of experience in enterprise promotion for FPOs and MSMEs and social research, especially value chain analysis. He has also got so many years of experience in work areas like CSR, strategy formulation and implementation of agriculture, NTPFP, based livelihood promotion programs, project management, and capacity building. Now, it's a small introduction which I am giving to all of you regarding Nirmalia sir. He himself, when he's going to speak, I think it is going to be a wonderful experience for all of you. And Nirmalia sir is also a certified master trainer by Pearson UK. He is a co-founder of E Associate Consultants Private Limited and currently working as a director, leading the domain of social business in the organization. Now I would like to introduce the second speaker, Ranjit Kumar sir. He is presently working as Regional General Manager, South and Central Asia at Fair Trade National of Network of Asia and Pacific Producers. Before that, he used to head projects of International Competence Center for Organic Agriculture. He has got a history dating back to Loyola College, Madras. And after that, he pursued his post-graduation from Institute of Rural Management. It is also going to be a very eye-opening experience for all of you, wherein I'm pretty much sure that both the speakers are going to focus upon how we have to emerge out of that constraints related to various silos. And they will be focusing upon the resilience we have to showcase with respect to focusing upon the empowerment and the development, majorly focusing upon rural area. And before initiating with the webinar, if I would like to brief anyone that if anyone of you are having any queries or questions, kindly post the same in the question answer section. Today's speakers will be really happy to discuss the issues and queries that you have in your mind related to today's topic of discussion. Now with this brief introduction, let me invite Nirmalia sir to take over from here.
Thank you, Dr. Jesse, and a very good morning to all of you. It's always a very good experience to come back to the alma mater, which has actually contributed to the development of ourselves as development professionals in future. So that's it's quite thrilling. So, and a very good morning to my fellow speaker, Mr. Ranjit Kumar, whom we have always revered, even when we were, together at the institute. So, thank you, sir, for joining this. Basically,
Thanks,
today's so the kind of how we have planned this is it's a short presentation. I will not elongate this much to be a boring kind of a monologue. Rather, we would just have a few slides to keep it short, just to show you about the overall overview of what local economic development is, and then we would like to have as much as discussion as possible through your questions, so that we can be very specific to what we answer. And there is one more thing that I would like to reiterate is that all this is kind of this is not a kind of a theory that we have put together. This is more of our practical experience and insights that we have developed over the years and tried to put in. So so this is something which is not a strictly goes by certain theory. So I was never really good at reading books and preparing theory, but then yes, the practical experience definitely does help. And the primary purpose of this is that tomorrow, as management leaders, as you move on to different organizations, or even you start off your own organizations tomorrow, these kinds of insights, these kind of thought process will help you to build up whatever you are planning up. So with that, I would like to start off now. The economic development, I mean, this is something which is not very new. As long as our societies are there, economic development has happened, and there were so many economists who have tried to define what are the different models for economic development and how things should be. And of course, there was a thought process which is right from the beginning again about local economic development. So ideally, if you search the internet on local economic development, you will have a lot of material which actually says that it's nothing with rocket science. It says that using local resources, whatever is available, you run your own economy. To some extent, even Gandhiji had proclaimed that once upon a time our villages. So there are 6.5 lakh villages in India. our villages all are kind of self-resilient. If an ideal model would be that they produce what they are consuming, and so they have the entire ecosystem within that. So over the years, we understood that this process is definitely kind of a self-reliant system, and India has been somewhat following a similar system. But then after the 90s, when the economies opened up, there were a lot of globalization which came into play. So trade flourished, and a lot of different kinds of models, came up. So I won't say that they were very well planned, but yes, they were organic in nature. Wherever basically development mushroomed, wherever there were opportunities, and the main boost of entrepreneurs. But then over the years, if we now look back, so what actually had happened was, over the years, there has been a very, very big divide between the rural and the urban centers. Now, if you look at typically that how this has come of age over the years. So if you look at our traditional economic systems, which was just I would say around a decade back, right? So we all know that our kind of the industry locations basically were both for finished as well as semi-finished products in urban areas. So the urban pockets were loaded with industries, and all our urban development authorities, maybe Jaipur Development Authority, Industrial Development Authorities, all were situated just in the outskirts of the cities or the urban locations. And this the primary route of development coming to urban areas was because rural areas wasn't developed enough. And when I say developed enough, I mean to say that the appropriate support mechanism for industries wasn't there. There wasn't appropriate kind of ecosystems. When I say ecosystem, this is something which has a different meaning for different people, but I can just explain what an ecosystem is. See, it is just like some of you would be students of science, some of you should be students of arts as well. So ecosystem is something where you also acknowledge that you are not alone in this universe. So you are there because there is some other entities which are helping that. So be it business, be it development, all have their own ecosystem. So which are the players? Who are those entities who are helping that that particular aspect to grow? That is the ecosystem that we are talking about. So when we say industry ecosystem, we try to say that, of course, industry grows in terms of we need finance, we need proper infrastructure, storage, go downs, warehouse, we need electricity, we need roads. So all those contribute to the part of ecosystem. And as you all know that the rural areas were lacking in these kind of areas. Now, another important point that was that we all know these are certain facts which you read day in and day out, and while your course in IRM you would be also going through very much, is that rural India is highly skewed towards I would say rural India is highly skewed towards rural in terms of the workforce. So even today, as we sit and discuss in 2020, the workforce population of around more than 70%, so it's actually 72.5% to be exact, of the workforce actually stays in rural areas, right? And if you look at agriculture as the mainstay of rural area, more than 60% of the employment of India is ascribed to agriculture sector. So that actually shows that there is a huge flux of people in rural areas. And of course, the urban areas, we all know they are quite saturated. And there has been a regular shift from the from the rural areas to urban areas in terms of labor, because labor have migrated from their traditional rural homes in search of better employment opportunities, in search of better jobs, better paying jobs, right? So the entire labor force, if we have to say right now, a majority of the workforce of our industries actually belong to the rural areas. And if you look at the domestic markets, typically in urban, the domestic markets, all kinds of products have a typical nature that they start with urban markets. Then there is an expansion as soon as the urban markets saturate, and then they move on to rural areas in terms of their expansion strategy. Now, this was the scenario earlier, but of course now there are a lot of companies who start with rural as well. So they have started kind of acknowledging that rural is a big consumption space, and there are consumers and they need products which are way different from the urban typical marketing processes. Earlier it wasn't the case. And also, if you look at the typical raw material, so be it food and be it textiles, so both of them have their major source of raw materials from our rural areas, right? So what exactly is a rural area? So if we are to profile a rural area, what has happened over the years is rural areas was typically those underdeveloped pocket zones which don't have capacities to process their own products, but they are the main producers of the raw materials. They are also producers of all the labor force that the industries require, but they don't have those amenities which can take them to the next level of being developed themselves. Okay. So, and we all know that the consumption pattern in rural areas was very, very frugal as of the last decade. But nowadays, if you look at the typical, the aspiration of rural consumers has increased way ahead, right? And they are also not behind in actually in the consumption sphere. If you look at different, I'm not going to go into that data, but if you have a check at the consumption patterns of FMCG, of consumer durables across rural area, you will be quite surprised that it in some areas it actually surpasses the urban demand as well. So there is a lot of consumption which is happening right now. There is a lot of demand which has actually generated in rural areas. And if you look at the development which has happened over the last decade, I think the biggest development that has actually come up is the information technology. So you all know that nowadays, right from IoT to different digital marketplaces to concepts like ENAM, where's the electronic national agriculture market system, which has been put to place, and it's still underdeveloped, but it's catching fire. So there's a lot of IT related kind of services which are coming up, which has kind of taken over in rural space. There are in fact more internet users in the rural areas than urban areas right now. And banking, finance, education, vocational skills, retail, all of these have caught up. All of these areas have caught up significantly, and right now there are very, very improved services in rural areas, which has actually occurred over the years. Then very, very importantly, the infrastructure we were talking of. So typically those bottlenecks in rural areas, even today you go to Bihar, Jharkhand, all those underdeveloped pockets which were considered to be very, very kind of backward earlier. Now, if you look at the roads, infrastructure, electricity network, everything has improved, both due to a lot of investment from the government as well as the private areas. So as soon as good infrastructures come up, there is a flourish in trade which is bound to happen. And last but not the least, there is a boost in social infrastructure. Now, when I say social infrastructure, this is of course different from the physical infrastructure. Social infrastructure is you can have the best quality, infrastructure. The technology can be of optim of the best order, but you also need people to run those, right? So you need institutions. You need good institutions to spearhead those. Now, all these years, what used to happen was rural areas lacked institutions in a proper manner. The proper community level institutions was not there. But thanks to the last decade, there has been a big boost in promoting SHGs, farmer producer organizations. So there are 2.5 million, more than 2.5 million SHGs now in India, and I think more than 7,000 farmer producer organizations which has come up, and there are around more 10,000 more FPOs which are coming up in the coming time. So there is a big boost of social social investment, social infrastructure, which has actually given you a big base on which the coming initiatives can be planned. So why am I saying this? Because this has happened over the years in the last decade, without much of an attention of the typical urban industries which were operating in those urban clusters, right? Now then came COVID, and this is something which we all know how it has actually affected our day-to-day life. So it has disrupted the supply chains absolutely. So typically what happened in our economy was there was a producer, there was a trader who used to buy, there were then wholesalers, distributors, and then the retailers. So that's a typical channel, right? Supply chain. And all those things got absolutely disrupted because suppliers did not have money to buy. They actually exited the markets. The demand overall for products fell down because people were trying to conserve more money because this is in a time of emergency. So the consumption overall goes down. There was a weak demand. Logistics and movement were highly restricted during the lockdown period. It is still today, right? So even if you have markets, even if you have products at one end, it's not feasible for somebody to send those markets in a viable manner, send those products in a viable manner. And of course, this is something which is one of the biggest crises of our Indian economy, or rather Indian social systems as well, is the massive reverse migration. We all know that in the last few months, almost 2 to 5 crore migrants, all from states like UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Odisha, especially from where the major labor used to work in different industrial locations, they went back sometime, and there were many people who went back on foot as well. So this massive migration which has happened, there are studies to support that because of the stress that they undertook, right? The first stress was they didn't have proper livelihoods in the cities because the industries were closed. And then when they were forced to leave because of hunger and poverty, then they faced a huge amount of problems going back to their basic location. So the amount of stress that these people actually undertook is going to be one of the deciding factors. And in some studies, it is being highlighted that I think around 25% of these entire workforce have decided not to go back alone, go back to the cities, right? So they would like to stay back in their villages and try to do something. Plus, let me also tell you, it combines with the Kharif season. So ideally, what happens is, in India, there are two types of migration which happens. One is a permanent migration, and one is a temporary migration. Now, the temporary migration is guided by the Kharif season because people have their agricultural lands back home. So after working for 6-7 months, they generally go back home for tilling their land. And since this got coincided with the Kharif season, so a lot of people will actually be not leaving before the Kharif season actually ends. So that actually adds on to the reverse migration people. So there is a lot of, so what has happened is, now the rural areas, there is a lot of people in the rural area. There are more mouths to feed in rural areas, and the supply systems are disrupted from urban, the urban rural area. So, and last but not the least, the rural non-farm sector, which actually contributes to around 27% of the of the incomes of the rural sector, that has come to a standstill because now nobody cares for those handloom weavers, nobody cares for those handicrafts, nobody is really interested in those textile people who used to weave those baskets and prepare fine handicrafts for you, which is a big area of our rural economy. So those products are facing very, very severe market crisis, and as a result, there is a big setback for the non-farm sector, and they have actually leaned back on the farm economies to for their subsistence. And everybody, of course, knows that this is kind of a economic recession which is coming up due to the reduced spending and consumption pattern. But at the same time, I would like to reiterate that the government has kind of taken up certain measures, which if implemented in the true spirit and letter, right, they have the capacity to, kind of turn around much of things. I would not say everything can be turned around, but there are certain, good points with policies as well. So there have been some latest policies which has come up as well. So if we now look at the typical scenario, what has happened is there is the rural economy post-COVID. It was disrupted with migrant labor, pressurized non-farm livelihoods, disrupted supply chains. And on one side, we have good policies which has come up. And as I was saying, that there were local institutions which were there, certain infrastructure which has also come up in rural areas. But alongside, we need a binder. We need something which can bind them together and create that solution. And that is being projected as the local economic development. So let me also tell you that local economic development is, which we used to say almost, a decade ago or 2 decades ago, is completely different from the local economic development that we are telling it, what we are terming it right now. This is kind of LED, local economic development 2.0, right? So this is a new version because this has components, this has added resources which has developed over the last few decades. So including your IT, including your infrastructure, including the social infrastructure, all those areas. So what are the main components? So to keep it very simple, what we have come out with is, it is the local production services on one hand, then the markets on the other hand, and the business ecosystem which binds everything together, right? So we will just have a look at all these 3 boxes as we unfold. So when we are talking of local production services, what we require right now is, there is a government policy, but are we able to, as people who would be getting into this sector, and let me also tell you, this is going to pick up. This is not just a kind of a distress situation. Okay. So for example, we are currently struggling with COVID. So as soon as the COVID crisis is over, this is something which would be coming up as a priority. So this would take another 3, 4, 5 years maybe down the line, but then this is the way, right? So this is not a very short-term kind of a boost that would happen, but this is something which we need to plan and execute in the coming years. In the coming 5 years, I think all of you would be managers in some good organizations. All of you would, some of you would be having your own organizations as well. So this is the area where we can actually concentrate. What we need right now is, we need urban market-centric production, smart and so there are big pockets of population, but very saturated ones in urban areas. We know that. So whatever being produced at the rural need to look at a urban market perspective as well. And so there is a concept of sustainability. I will come to that when we face different kinds of questions later on. But we need very, very smart and sustainable production systems. When I say smart and sustainable production systems, it means optimum quality, very good focus on the specific markets, and we need to be viable. So we need to be financially viable, because that has to be one of the major factors for these products and services to cater to the country's needs. So there has to be certain development of ancillary services. As soon as new areas come up, new production units come up, you need to have both horizontal as well as a vertical kind of a development, where when I say horizontal, what I mean to say is, if there is a biscuit factory which comes up, you would require a packaging unit, you would require people for transporting that, right? So there are certain people who come together as ancillary services, they will add on horizontally to the business. And also when you are ending up let's say a biscuit factory made out of wheat, then you would require products like wheat, bajra, or different kinds of millets to add on to prepare different kinds of products altogether. So you would be integrating different forms of, so there might be a miller, a bajra miller somewhere else, you would be integrating with that person. You would be integrating with different kinds of people who are in the value chain itself. So for example, you would require a wholesaler to sell the products. You will require a retailer and a brand to sell these products to. So maybe you need to be tying up with certain retail brands. So that's the typical value chain increment, which we term as the vertical integration. So there are 2 types of development which would happen. One is the ancillary services, and also new products which need to come up. Then of course, this is a very important factor, that almost 5% of our rural produce from rural areas, so be it agriculture produce or be it anything else, actually sees the light of a proper value addition. Majority of the value addition which happens to raw materials happens in urban areas. So less than 5% of products are actually processed, or finished products come out of rural areas, it's the look at if you look at the quantums of raw material, it is huge, but if you look at the finished products which come out, it is less than 5%. Okay, so that is an area where we require more and more value added and finished products at the rural center. And last but not the least, this everything happens in a clusterized format. So we can't have ancillary services, 100 kilometers far off. So we need to develop those services at a geographical cluster, at a geographical proximity to kind of develop the systems there. And that is the main essence of the local economic development which would happen. If you look at the typical market box, what needs at the market level is one fantastic feature of our rural economy. It is the nerve center of our rural economy is the rural hearts, right? So across India, there are around more than 22,000 rural hearts, and these are small micro markets, weekly markets, daily markets, and also markets which cater to the needs of rural people in a day-to-day level. We need to upgrade those markets. We need to take them to a scale where they would be catering to a large section of the population. Okay, so that is something, again, we would all those topics can be talked on for eternity. I mean, there is so much material in this, but then we need better market infrastructure facilities where products can be stored, processed, value added, right, at the market facilities itself. We need more market information system. This is already happening, but then we need to connect those dots. We now have the wherewithals, we have IoT, we have internet facilities in rural areas to connect with different digital markets, but we need more market information. Okay, and finally, the sector engagement policy and processes. So that is very important, which has already started. There are a lot of new schemes which has come up, policy reforms which has come up. We would discuss them as we go ahead. So, and when we look at the business ecosystem, this is kind of promotion of the local skill. Of course, to do this, we need local entrepreneurs to come up, local youth to be skilled in new jobs, in new areas. So the skilling is very, very important. And individual entrepreneurs, as I was said, that they are the spearheads of this entire thing, because on one side you have institutions, on other side there are very, very small specific services which need to be rendered by individual service providers, and they are the ones who can be of very, very big game changers in this entire model. And we also require proper financial linkages. There are a lot of new financial instruments which has come up. The last decade did not see so many different kinds of financial products in the market. So be it insurance, be it savings, be it loans, credits, we have seen a big boost of different kinds of institutions which has come up. Slowly, the formal money, informal money lender, the Lala of the village, is slowly transforming into formal systems where everything is being standardized, everything is being gauged in a different manner, and the unbankable populations are being included financially. So there is a lot of boost that is further required in terms of the financial linkages. A part of it has already happened, but now it's all about connecting the dots. And lastly, the technology that we are talking of, they need to be cost effective. They need to be something which will not actually enhance the cost of the product, but it will complement in bringing down the product cost for the consumers. That is the challenge. But then there are already the specific ingredients which are into place. So you have a lot of agri-tech startups which are coming up, which are trying to make lives of people easy, lives of farmers easy, lives of rural consumers easy. So it's easy to order now. It's easy to get your products delivered now. The products, if you look at, the quality have enhanced, varieties have enhanced. So there are people, there are those ingredients. We just need to pick up the right thing and put it in the right place. So now I will take a pause and move on to Ranjit sir for his views on the opportunities part. Ranjit sir, if you would take it up.
Thank you so much, Nirmalya. There was a lot of information that you have conveyed. I just hope it's not too much for the audience right now. Nirmalya has given you a very good overview of what a rural market is and the components of a rural economy and the various opportunities there. I will be touching more on the markets as well as the, you know, the practical aspects of certain initiatives that have been mentioned in the previous section. So if you look at market openings, market opportunities, the growth drivers are ethical sourcing, which is now, I work for an organization called Fairtrade, which Dr. Jessie kindly mentioned when she introduced me. Fairtrade basically is a brand that is having a lot of demand in the European markets as well as USA. What it basically stands for is a just price and economic and environmental responsible production. And it also looks for things like climate change and gender equality, everything in the supply chain. So when you see a product with a Fairtrade label, it means that it has been produced very ethically and with all the negatives that I've just now mentioned not present in the system. So, and then that's what I said, ethical sourcing. Now, a lot of people are now interested in such products world over, especially the younger generation. They want to see sustainability. They want to see that the climate change is not, furthered by, conventional way of growing agriculture, like chemicals and pesticides and things like that. So that is why there is a demand for such products. So, and that is what we cater to. So we have the producers all based in the southern global south, as they call it. That's the South American continent, the African continent, and Asia Pacific. And the north are the consumers. So that's how it is called the global north and the south. Then there's the concept of the living wage. What exactly is living wage? Is basically, it's nothing, no rocket science here. It's basically to do with your, cost of nutrition, which is a low-cost diet. It's then the basic cost of a decent housing, other essential like expenses on education, healthcare, clothing and transport, and provision for unexpected events. Now, what is this where is this supposed to come from? It comes from, of course, if you look at Fairtrade, the Fairtrade crop, or from the net income of other crops and livestock, or if you look at, value of self-consumed crops. Why self-consumed crops? Because that adds to the, this is basically an income. Had it been sold in the market, it would have fetched them an income, but then, or if they had not produced it, they would have spent that much money trying to procure it. So that also is taken into account, as well as off-farm income, in the calculation of living income. Now, this is a concept that we have been trying to promote, and there's a lot of interest in it because people do understand that the farmers also need to have a decent, lifestyle. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, just like what Nirmalya told you, there will be a migration, and migration not in small numbers but large numbers. There was a study sometime in 2013 done by a very popular journalist who used to write on rural issues. So he has calculated that 2,000 farmers move away from farming every day in India. So you can calculate, you can do the maths. So that many people are leaving farming. And when you have such a large section of the population moving away, then who's to do the farming? And how will the cities undertake such pressure? As it is, it's crumbling under the weight of this influx of migrants. Likewise, women and youth in farming to replace an aging population. Just what I said now. I mean, it's connected to it. When the youth and farming want more money, youth and women want more money. So they don't look at farming as an option. Women may not migrate as such, but they definitely do not look at farming because of the income issues. There's no attractive returns on investments. So that is where we need to actually look at bringing in a lot more profitability into the farming operations. That is where what Nirmalya had earlier said, government is doing a lot on doubling farmers' income. They have FPOs, they are promoting FPOs. Like he said, approximately 7,000 FPOs are in existence. But then the sad part of it is not many are very vibrant, and that has a lot of issues that contribute to it. It could be starting with social dynamics, caste, class, the politics, everything. And there are a list of examples. I've worked with a lot of FPOs, and then there have been a lot of issues that we have seen. But the common thread among the successful FPOs are the people, the visionaries who are at the helm of affairs. If they have a vision and they are able to bring the others together, then there is a good scope of attracting the youth and also bringing in women into farming. Health and well-being, of course, that's another opportunity that we see. Years back when we were trying to introduce organic products into the market, there was very little interest. Hardly anybody would want to pay extra. But then we introduced this basically into a section of population which were well-heeled, educated, health conscious. So typically it was, if you look at a city like Bangalore where I live, it was the IT crowd. They were health conscious, and they were exposed to a lot of concepts and everything from abroad, and slowly that came in. And now today it has almost become a mainstream product, organic produce. There's a huge demand for the produce, and it comes up with better margins. It is sold at higher margins, thereby a lot more money. The farmers get a higher pie for the pie of the customers, higher proportion of the customer's pie, higher proportion of the customer's pie. So then another area of opportunities are the sustainable labels, of which we are one, fair trade. Then there is something called the Rainforest Alliance, in-house sustainability. See, the issue is that, as I said, you must have all heard about Greta Thunberg and the way she has been popularizing climate change and the ill effects of climate change, and asking the people to, contribute to mitigating and adapting to climate change. So there's a lot of knowledge, exposure along these lines with the general populace in the global north. So, and therefore there is a market for it. So now even the companies themselves are bringing in-house sustainability labels. Another area of, concept that needs to be promoted here is human resource due diligence in supply chains. What does this basically mean is that the advanced countries like US, Australia, Canada, all these people have realized that there's a lot of forced labor, a lot of gender inequality, child labor, and all in the supply chains. And this is definitely not sustainable, and it is against human rights. So there is increased interest in human resource due diligence in the supply chains. And that is what the Modern Slavery Act is all about. So, for example, if it needs to be actually defined, it talks about business activities that may result in adverse impacts related to corporate governance, workers, human rights, the environment, bribery, and consumers. So they need to take care of all this. And the most common human right violations are the child rights. Then women are overrepresented in underpaid jobs. In the leadership positions, there are very less people, or very less women. And then right to environment, deforestation, climate change. All these are the rights, and these are all what has to be reflected and by the companies, and they need to see how they're going to do business and make sure that they have taken adequate measures to see that these risks are mitigated. The next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So when we actually focus on the business processes, like Nirmalya already told you, there is use of precision technologies, IoT, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. These are being increasingly introduced and adopted by farmers to cut down productivity, to improve productivity and cut down costs. There are numerous studies that actually go and talk about how much there has been an increase in productivity, how much cost cutting has happened. See, for example, some of these are examples of how these help in improving productivity and cutting down costs. There's something called the site-specific nutrient management, which basically is, if you look, if there must be people from the BSc agriculture background. So typically there used to be a blanket recommendation. If you're growing, say, tea, there's a 60-0-60, which is N, 0 of potash, 0 of phosphorus and 60 of potash. 60 is the kg, 60 kg N, 60 kg K. So that's a blanket recommendation. Now what has happened is, using a lot of sensors and satellite imagery, they can decide how much exactly a field needs. These are all geotagged through latitudes and longitudes. So exactly how much a field needs is what is recommended, and thereby they bring down the rate of fertilizer application, and it has resultant effects on climate change and costs, and then climate change. Then laser land leveling. Laser land leveling is typically, it talks about, even leveling of the land. Usually when you do it manually, there are certain, bumps and things like that, which increases the irrigation cost. It has been found that it increases the irrigation cost, increase of electricity, and probably in rural areas, if there is no electricity, there's diesel, then there is that much of smoke coming up, and emission of CHGs, that is carbon greenhouse gases, GHGs. Then ensuring traceability through blockchain. That, of course, I don't know whether how many of you all know about blockchain. Blockchain, in very simple language, is, as you enter data into your computer, the people downstream stakeholders, they have their own computers, and the same data gets fed in each of these computers. So you cannot do any fraudulent or malpractice later on. It brings about a traceability. So that is blockchain technologies. There are also organizations that provide traceability based on QR codes. That is, when you just there is a small QR code that's on the packet of the product, and then if you just use your mobile phone to click on the QR code, you get information right from which farmer has produced it, and what are the chemicals he has used, if he has used, or if he's organic, that is shown. At what intervals the agronomic practices were done, when was it harvested, where did it go for its processing, and the entire supply chain. Likewise, satellite and sensor-based data to improve agronomic operations. Now, what it basically means is, there are sensors that actually read the pH level, read the pH level on the soil, and EC levels, the NPK levels, and things like that. I guess, yeah. So quality, as far as quality is concerned, yes, it has to be consistent, and customer preferences need to be taken care of. Now, when we are working with the FPOs, there were times when exports were attempted, and the sample and the consignment never matched. So there were issues. Customer preferences. When you talk about, I'll talk about a case of a mango export that we did a few years back, and some of the people thought sweeter the mango, the better it is. But to the Western palate, what actually happens is they prefer in their taste preferences. If it is less sweet, the better. So the produce didn't sell well. So, there are some nuances in the markets that one needs to be aware of. Likewise, integrity in the supply chain is extremely, extremely important. That is why traceability has become, is taking a important position these days. There are, what has happened is, earlier on in soybean, in chili, and things like that, when people used to export, what happened was that they would probably buy it, I'm talking about the organic market, and they would probably buy it from the normal market and pass it off as organic stuff. So many times the material has gone to the destination port, and when tested, they have found that it has got high MRLs, that is the maximum residue limit for pesticides. So it has crossed that. So then a lot of rejection. There was a year when about 60 or 70 containers of one single company was rejected. So, I mean, that's how widespread these issues are and what needs to be done. You need to be extremely honest. So, there's another issue is that of, you know, yeah. So in chilies, typically what happens is that there's a lot of pesticides that are being sprayed. There's 17, 18 rounds of pesticides that are being sprayed, and that are not completely biodegradable in certain senses, and it affects the health of the people who consume it. So those are issues that need to be taken care of when you look at the supply chain and when you're looking at marketing. The competitive advantage, yes, the cost advantage, perception. Some people think branded products are very good, and thereby they should be better than the normal produce. It is right. Sometimes it's wrong. I mean, there may not be too much of a variation in these kinds of produce. Then, of course, the niche markets. Now, if I were to take an example, there's the specialty coffee sector, which basically means that, I mean, coffee is of two varieties, the Arabica and the Robusta. And if you're in a cupping score, cupping is a process wherein, like tea tasting, you taste the coffee and score it. Now you must have 84 points or above for an Arabica or 80 and above for Robusta to actually qualify as a specialty coffee. Now in India, you hardly find these because the problem is that we need to take care of quality in such a minute manner. So this is where I'm trying to come from. You know, you need to do a proper market study, do it properly. And the last section is the market and customer segmentation. Basically, it has to do with, in terms of markets, you need to know which geography has the best chance of, attracting this produce or having it consumed there. And then you need to have, you need to know about your competitors. Then you need to know the demand and determinants of these produce. Now, for example, in the COVID times, tea suddenly it saw a very huge rise in prices because it was perceived that during the pandemic times, it adds to the immunity. So there's suddenly the huge demand for tea, and the prices, the farmers got, the companies or the workers got a good price. I mean, farmers and companies got a good price. So that is. But then again, there are demands. Demands are seasonal demands. There are some permanent demands. All this. So if I get into it, then it's a huge chapter by itself. So I'll just stop here and then probably start taking questions, because I think we have actually thought we would do the presentation for 20 minutes, but it's almost 45 minutes now. So
Yeah.
and the problem is that when we have so much of information to share, prioritizing it becomes difficult. So
No, I think
yeah, I now
Ranjit sir, what was important also, because we purposefully took a little bit more elaborate approach, because we thought that since students would be knowing through many new concepts, many areas where they need clarification. So in one way, we actually have been answering a lot of questions which we were contemplating as well.
Okay.
But yes, there are a few questions which I was just having a look at. So
Okay.
for example, there was this question that if since the overall consumption right now has come down drastically, and people are not consuming FMCG products and expensive products, and how will kind of this affect, or rather how will it in turn create a development process in rural areas, especially in creating jobs? So you would like to take that?
Yeah, I can do that. See, basically, if you actually look at, you'll be surprised to know that the auto industry has kickstarted with a higher offtake of tractors. So if you look at it, I mean, this is basically is an example of how rural economy can actually kickstart the economy. So there is a lot of money that is being pumped by the government also into the rural sector. I mean, there is Jan Dhan that goes directly to the beneficiary. And then there is a lot of interest, a lot of money that is being pumped in various government schemes. There's the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana, PM, what's it called? Nirmala?
Jan Kalyan Yojana.
No, PM, it's called PMKY, I think. It was RKVY, there's a Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, then PMKY. There's multiple, yojanas that have been now brought into place, and a lot of money is being pumped into the rural sector. So in the hope that it will kickstart rural economy, and that will, have its ripple effect on the urban economy as well. Paramparagat, yeah. Thank you, Santosh. Yeah, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. So those kinds of yojanas are there.
There is another aspect to this. Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes. You can
Yes. Sorry. So see, actually, what has happened is, as I was saying, that this is a crisis situation right now. Right now, things are something which there are two modes to handling a problem. The first mode is there's a fire in the house, so you start looking for water, you start looking for fire extinguishers, and then you address the fire. And the next step that you do after the fire is extinguished, then you go back and try to understand why this happened and why in the first place the fire came out. And then you start maybe changing the wiring systems which might be responsible for the fire. So what I mean to say is, right now this is a crisis situation. Right now there are many aspects which needs just plug-in. So government is doing some plugging. Other things will happen naturally and organically, while others will not happen. There will be certain sectors which will be affected. For example, we all know how badly hit the infrastructure led the retail sector is affected, as well as the kind of the infrastructure kind of. So people are not buying flats, like people are not buying homes. So that is one of the major sector which has been hit. The second sector which has been hit very hard is people are not going anywhere. So the hospitality, the real estate. I was missing the point. So real estate is hit hard. Hospitality is hit hard.
Aviation is hit hard.
Hotels have absolutely. Aviation has completely, lost their track. So what I'm trying to say is, there are areas, these are the immediate reactions to the problem. But slowly, there will be an evolution. Slowly, things will come back to normal. But then we need to look back at the root cause. What was the problem that actually came out, right? So I think that is very important. So this would automatically answer that. So as I said, that LED is not an immediate response, but it is a response when we go back to the planning table, when we understand, and then come up.
Actually, to contribute, to add to what Nirmalya said earlier, in the course of my career, we have seen that a lot of these value addition that Nirmalya talked about in a place called Erode in Tamil Nadu, they grow turmeric. Turmeric is generally taken kilometers away to actually powder it and sell it to the next level of consumer. But what we did is, we have this mobile polishing units. Basically, if you look at turmeric has a very hard skin. Now this has to be removed before it is powdered. For the removing of the skin is done through a polishing machine. Now this polishing machine can be attached to a tractor, and then it can right next to the field, you harvest this crop, boil it, dry it, polish it, and then take it. So then you again, you're reducing the number of levels of value addition that would probably take place in 100 or 200 kilometers away. So there's a cost advantage, because all these are waste. And now taking all this waste to the processing center doesn't make sense. So as far as possible, if you can bring it closer to the source, it helps. That's what Nirmalya was telling you. The ecosystem, if it is very close in the rural area and the ancillary is also placed there, then you have a cost advantage.
That's right.
So that is what I wanted to add. And if you're talking about rural entrepreneurship, there is multiple rural entrepreneurships that are available now. For example, I don't know if you've heard of MSSRF, which is MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, based out of Chennai. They have actually trained a lot of village women, the SHG women, to manufacture biofertilizers. and biological control organisms. Now, this can go into your compost. If you can use your compost, you can reduce your chemical fertilizer usage, which will again save a lot of foreign exchange. And then it contributes to mitigating climate change. So that also can be done. Then there is biodigesters, I mean, which can be used to provide much needed cooking fuel. You know, you can cut down on your LPGs. There are so many other activities. You know, even taking what do you call this, crop waste. Crop waste can be used to use gasifiers. In Patna, there are gasifiers that provide electricity. So I mean, there are so many economically viable enterprises that can be set up in the rural area. And that is what we need to look at. So actually, one is to get out of this pandemic, as well as to ensure that the rural-urban divide is shortened.
Exactly. I think to address one or two questions which are in the same light, Ankur had asked that how to ensure that all sections of the society are actually addressed in terms of the employment in rural areas. A fantastic question. I think the best part is, see, I would just give an example. I was earlier sharing the example of a biscuit factory, right? Now, earlier what used to happen was the wheat which was being produced in the rural areas, they were being transported to a nearby city, and all the processing was actually happening there, as you rightly said, for the example of turmeric. Now this is the time when we actually need to create systems where wheat will be will be processed in very near the farms itself, so in rural areas itself. Now when I'm saying wheat process, wheat actually undergoes a process, number one, from the wheat to atta or maida or refined flour, and from the refined flour to, let's say, biscuits. Now there are two levels of value addition that I'm talking here. One is a primary kind of a value addition, and the second is a secondary value addition, right? So when I am talking of a biscuit factory, let's say, now who is going to put up this biscuit factory? It would be a person like the learned students of IRM, the learned students of different management schools who are being boosted to take up entrepreneurship. People who have worked for so long and then they want to set up certain industries back home. So it is all about entrepreneurship at the highest level. So they right now can get all the help possible from the government schemes and that are possible. So they have that ecosystem right now. Now you have good power. Now you have good infrastructure to set up such institutes. Now, as soon as a biscuit factory comes up, there will be a huge requirement of skilled labor, skilled people who will be running those machineries, right? Where will they come from? They will come from the local youth who are being educated today and who are getting into different kinds of ITIs and getting trained in technical education. They are the ones who will get jobs. And also look at the interesting part is, even the workers, the blue collared workers, they can all come from the nearby rural areas. And finally, the farmers who were selling wheat earlier to different kinds of intermediary channels, they would be selling the wheat directly to this industry. So they would be getting the best price, which earlier a middleman used to enjoy, right? So it is kind of an equitable system for all. So that actually addresses the question for how this is going to affect entirety in itself. Then there were certain, I think there was another interesting question that.
Yeah, I think one more thing that I would like to add here is they've talked about jobs here. Now, another government scheme is the PPP, the public-private partnership. So today, a lot of companies are tying up with farmer producer organizations to, basically they want to secure their supply chain. The person who has the supply chain is the guy who's going to win in the market, because the crop, you cannot suddenly manufacturing increase or decrease. So if there is a sudden demand, you cannot run around, looking for the produce. So if you have a supply chain, to that extent, your business is secure. And then you can get it at a certain price which otherwise you would have had to pay a much higher price if you were to buy it from some trader or anything. So this PPP, this helps, the farmers also, the FPO also to develop. At the same time, it's a win-win situation for the private company or whoever it is. So there are a lot of social businesses that have been doing this, and also companies like ITC and Olam and all see a lot of interest in this, and they have put up projects. I myself have done for a few companies in Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. So we have tied up, and there's this tribal area in Andhra Pradesh, very close to Visakhapatnam. It's called the Araku Valley, a part of the Araku Valley where turmeric grows at a certain elevation, and it has got very high curcumin. So this very high curcumin content of turmeric is used for the cosmetic as well as the pharmaceutical industry. And so their price is much higher. So what they were previously selling at Hearts or the village market, today there's a dedicated set of customers who buy it at a much higher price, benefiting the farmers. So in between, now the farmers cannot do the processing. So in between there is a small leeway for somebody to start a processing center there, and then connect these the farmers and the companies. And then when you do that, you're like I told you earlier, the cost of the produce comes down. You become competitive. So that's where I see a lot of opportunities in the rural area.
Absolutely, and that actually creates opportunities for rural, people or youth like you and me. Right?
Yep.
So I will just, there is a question that, what about the future of IRM students, especially in rural segments? I can only share my own example, right? So what has happened is I used to work for different organizations, and then at some point of time, I gave up my job and, came up with some fellow colleagues to bring up this organization called Ecotiate Consultants. And I had already mentioned a link in the chat box to refer to that. This is specifically, we are developing a series on local economic development, LED. So the website says, the address is led.ecotiateconsultants.com, right? So I mentioned that, so do visit that site. But what I can come back here is, see what has happened over the years is, and I know many such batchmates, many such people who have gained from this experience, and there are new opportunities which are coming up. So that is an area where if you are able to manufacture, if you are able to provide services at much better cost, at much better, competitive advantage, as Rajit sir was saying. So that advantage is being provided by the rural areas now, because as I said, that those basic problems which the areas had earlier are now no longer existent. So now they are opening up doors, inviting people to come on board and become entrepreneurs, right? So I think the first advantage should be taken by people like you and me, right? So yeah, and there is another question, Ranjit sir. We'll move on a little quickly.
Yeah.
Is that the farm machinery and equipment cost is quite high. That is absolutely right.
Yes.
See, that is what has happened is there is a fantastic situation that I was referring to, the social infrastructure, if you would remember.
FPOs.
So there are FPOs, right, which has been formed. Now, one of the major business areas of these FPOs, the Farmer Producer Organization, is CHC, which is a custom hiring center. Now, what does a CHC do? They actually buy, products which individual farmers cannot buy, right? So there are, let's say, high-end harvesters, combined harvesters, along with a range of other products and
rotovators, weeders,
exactly,
all kinds of things. Yes,
exactly. So they pool in their resources together, they buy that, and they set up a custom hiring center where now these expensive products, they need not be bought, but they can be hired by farmers. So that actually, is a model which is quite established right now. And let me also tell you, there are active companies who have come into this. There is an organization called EM3, which is the largest aggregator of such, machineries. So any place you look at, there are business opportunities which are coming up, right? Specifically, and there is government
help also for this.
Absolutely,
there are schemes that will help you do that. Exactly. And if you look at SFAC, they also, if there's a farmer producer organization, SFAC is the Small Farmers Agro Business Consortium. They actually give you, they invest. There's an equity component to their. It's actually a debt which is converted into equity in the FPO model. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of support for the FPOs
Yes,
these
and
days.
there is a new program on FPOs which is coming up. More than 10,000 FPOs are to be promoted right now. So the government has given the mantle to 3 different organizations: NABARD, SFSC, and CDAC, which is the Cooperative Development Corporation. Right. So all 3 would be taking up the mantle for promoting 10,000 more FPOs right now. So those basic infrastructure, those basic systems are coming in place. Now, I think the last question that I can take right now is that, how to, because LED is very much linked with sustainable agriculture practices. Absolutely right. The main point of all this discussion is that what went wrong in our earlier models, we shouldn't repeat that, right? Earlier our models were too much focused on money and money alone. So we actually left beside 2 important, components of the sustainability triangle, which is the social system and which is the environmental system. So it is a fact now, it is a proven fact that you require 3 different pillars to succeed. The pillar number 1 is, of course, profitability, which we all know and which we have all focused upon. But the pillar number 2 is you also need to create social systems. Any profitability motive which creates a rift in the society is not sustainable. And this is a fact which is which I and you cannot just say this. I mean, this is a truth across ages, right? And the third component, very, very important, is any initiative which may have a good social system, which may have a good profitability, but if it is not environmentally sustainable, if it continues to degrade the environment in which you are living and you are staying, then again it is not sustainable in the future. So look at all the pesticides and chemical fertilizers that has gone to our fields. Somewhere down the line they have started reducing the agricultural productivity, right? So it is time to go back to components like sustainable agriculture, and we all take the 3 P's together. It is people, planet
Profit.
and profit, right? So all take all the P together, take the social mandate, which Ranjit sir was saying beautifully about different standards which has come up to reduce child labor, to reduce that rift between urban rural divide, and also to encourage more gender sensitivity in terms of, because there is already 61% women work in rural areas. They are ingrained in agriculture, right? So why can't they come to leadership position, right? So we need to have a thought at those aspects as well, right? I think that is all from our side as of now. And
I think there. Okay,
so I'll
somebody
pass
has
the
said.
buck to Dr. Jesse.
Yeah, I think there is one more thing on advantage of potential of rural tourism. Yeah,
Yes.
that is
That's
something
right.
that is also is very much in vogue these days. Given that the pandemic has completely thrown to the tourism industry is completely out of place. So now rural tourism has taken over, and you have this farm tourisms. You where organic, they grow organic produce, organic milk, and which again is certified, and they provide homestay basis. In a state like Kerala, there's a lot of homestays. I'm also sure that in Rajasthan also there are these homestays where people
The hills as
go
well.
and experience the village level atmosphere, and there's a lot of demand for that kind of tourism.
That's
So
right.
I'm sure that if somebody is interested, that is a good option too.
In fact, what I would like to again comment on here is, and it's to complement what you were saying, not only rural tourism is one of those sectors which has come up because the overall service sector, addressing the rural has come up. So it is, let's say, you can always give examples of BPOs in rural, right? So students or people being engaged in business process outsourcing units, they are being established in rural India as well, right? So there are different kinds of rural malls which are coming up, right? So you need salespeople for that. You need a lot of sales personnel to sell products to different people. So look at the service sector, which was so important in urban growth story, that has started picking up in rural as well. So tourism specifically is one of those service areas which has actually a lot of promise, as you were rightly saying. because it actually links with the well-being, with the health and well-being sector as well. So people go to rural to get more oxygen rather than get that stuffy atmosphere in urban areas. Yeah.
I think there is one more question on laser land leveling. Somebody had asked. Yeah. Laser land leveling is basically using the laser to, kind of level the land. I mean, usually when you do it manually, it is quite uneven, and unevenness creates, use of more of electricity while irrigating, or diesel when you are irrigating. The examples are in Punjab and Haryana, very close to your place,
That's right.
where people have done that, and there's a study on it. If anybody is interested, of course, they can either connect to me or to Nirmalya. I can share those study details also, or you can also go into the net and find out for yourself.
Right.
It's available.
The best part about laser leveling is that it actually reduces the cost of irrigation drastically.
Yes.
So there are 2 points again, because I am talking in terms of that triple P, if you remember. So
People,
I
planet,
will
profit.
talk of number 1, reducing the cost of the irrigation, but that is not important. Most important is it
Water
reduces
conservation.
water usage. Right?
Yes, water conservation.
Yes, so it reduces water consumption. Fine. So are we done now?
Is there any more questions?
There
Of course, this is a huge.
There is one
Sorry?
question. There is one question that that is left to be answered. Mr. Ankur has raised one particular question. Because of low usage of fertilizers and pesticides in Northeast, the government is focusing upon that particular geographical area as an organic hub. But the major problem which the people over there are facing is having small land holdings, and there is a lack of institutional framework. So there are a lot of challenges that these people in Northeast are facing. So can you suggest, do you have any insights with respect to how the people of Northeast can take it ahead and take the advantage of that particular quality soil and the quality produce that they're coming up with?
Of course,
absolutely.
In my career, I've worked in the Northeast with farmer producer organization, and we have actually exported material from there. In the case of Nagaland, there is very close to the town of Dimapur. There's a village called Perin, from where we used to procure ginger, and it used to be processed and it was sent to UK. And likewise in Mizoram, there is turmeric and again spices, turmeric, ginger. Then there is bird's eye chili, which is of high demand. Then there is mandarin oranges. If you look at Sikkim, then cherry pepper. In Sikkim also there is. See, we understand there's a lot of infrastructural issues there. One, because of the roads not being proper, and then people actually have to carry the load of they actually cultivate in the valleys, and then to come up to the road they have to climb a hill and bearing all the load on their back. So those kinds of issues are there, but that is slowly being the governments there are taking notice of cognizance of all this, and they're building the infrastructure there. And Northeast, basically the produce is fantastic. I mean, it would pass muster in any of the competitive arenas in the world. The turmeric, their ginger, their Naga chili. It's one of the good. Naga chili is very, very hot. And it's used for a lot of its capsaicin content is more than 1 lakh, I think. More than 1.1 to 2.5 is the Scoville heat units of that capsaicin. And since it is very hot, it is used for both pharmaceutical industry more than for cuisine. So there are a lot of opportunities coming there. In fact, there is somebody from IIM who has started an industry there. It's called Parvata Foods, and it is in Sikkim, and they are processing ginger and turmeric, which they procure from the FPOs, farmer producer organizations in Sikkim, and then export it. So there are a lot of opportunities there also. And likewise in Sikkim, you get large cardamom.
That's right. I would just like to compliment what you were saying. You have very, very well, defined the complex, the entire speciality of Northeast, because Northeast has a different kind of a product grade altogether. which has a different market altogether, right?
Yes.
Now, the problems of Northeast is, let me also tell you that all the 8 states in the Northeast are different from each other, absolutely different from each other. Although we term it as a Northeast in one just sum up, but they are all different. Their cultures are different, they're sociologically different, and even the products are different. So what I mean to say is, first and foremost, I think the problems of Northeast is that it, as you were also rightly saying, the infrastructure, the communication system, that is still underdeveloped there. I would say still underdeveloped, because the rest of the country needs to understand a little more about the speciality of these products. And these products have a lot of significance in terms of their medicinal value, their natural value, and they are completely different. You don't find other areas of the country with these products. So that niche marketing hasn't been really done for the Northeast, number one. Number two is that those institutional mechanisms, those institutional systems in terms of FPOs, in terms of SAGs coming together, preparing that scale. Scale is a major issue in the Northeast because of the undulating terrain. So hilly regions and undulating terrain. So it becomes very difficult to aggregate and sell at lower cost. So the only answer to this is create better market systems, create more knowledge among consumers. So consumers will definitely have a bigger boost. And as soon as that happens, keeping the environmental aspect in mind without actually trying to impose anything which doesn't belong to the Northeast. If we look at local economic development in the Northeast, then LED is one of the best model that can be for Northeast. Yeah.
And Sikkim is already the first organic state in
organic.
India.
Right.
Yes,
that's right.
So and typically, like Nirmalia was saying, that cost advantages are not there to be sold in the domestic market. So you have to look at niche markets, especially abroad, pharmaceutical industries or condiments industry or cosmetic industry, to actually get the returns on investments.
That's right. Okay, so I think we have it. Thank you. So yes, Dr. Jesse, over to you.
I would like to thank Nirmalia Mandal sir and Ranjit Kumar sir for this wonderful session. I think we have exceeded the time which I have requested. It was only 1 hour I was requesting, but I think already it is already 1.5 hours. It was really an exclusive session, and there are so many new concepts even I have learned from this particular session. We look forward for future association as well. We can continue with such sessions because students will be able to get and they will be able to understand the concepts that is actually being practiced in the market. Even when we talk about Northeast area, Sikkim and all, we were not at all aware about all these developments. That is really a wonderful insight that we have received. So we look forward for such wonderful sessions from both of you, sir. It was really insightful. And I would like to thank Kingsuk also for coordinating with both the speakers for conducting this wonderful webinar. And all the persons who have asked the questions, Poonam, Ankur, Vishnu, Arun, and Dr. Tarjini as well. These questions have actually added more value to the whole webinar. And once again, wishing you all a happy, great day ahead. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jesse. It was very nice of you to have invited us. It was an honor and a privilege to address the students of our alma mater. As Nirmalia had said, we'd be only too happy to share our learnings with you all, because you guys are going to take it forward from where we have left off. So I'm sure Nirmalia will have a lot more. I mean, all of this we tried to, there's so much of information. We have just tried to condense it into 11 slides. But each of these statements, you can have a chapter on them. So it was very, very difficult to condense. We didn't know how much because of the wealth of knowledge, it was very difficult for us to condense. But we can definitely look at follow-up sessions on certain topics of interest, mutual interest. Then we can definitely look at doing those.
Yeah, and I think I can end this, Ranjit sir, with a note that I'll be absolutely happy to help anybody who would want to know more about this. and come up. So you can always contact me on my email, which is Nirmalya, NIRMALLYA @ecociate.com, ECOCIATE, ecociate.com. So Nirmalya@ecociate.com. So please feel free to contact me for any suggestions, anything that I will be more than happy to help you with whatever I am capable of.
Okay, Nirmalya sir, I
Thank you.
think Poonam will be getting in touch with you because she's already doing some project related to land learning. So
That's
naturally, she has asked one question in the question answer box even. So
Yeah.
naturally, it is going to be a really great help for her as well in person with respect to her research project also.
And I would also like to, extend something that because in Ecociate, which is a consulting firm, and we are a knowledge-based agency, so we keep on doing very, very interesting work around sustainability, around sustainable agriculture. And if anybody is interested in taking up certain, small assignments in terms of, doing a kind of a internship, not exactly a summer internship right now, but then small kind of
Bank project, right?
projects, yes, small projects, so then they can contact me as well, and we will try to fit them in whatever existing thing, interesting work that we are having, and we can also develop new projects for them. So that is something which, as an alumni, I can always promise back to my institute.
Okay, that's a wonderful thing. Students will be learning by doing it because we are also
That's right.
appreciating this action research type of an activity wherein students will practice what they're actually studying.
That's right.
So that's a wonderful.
Unfortunately for us, we do not take interns because we are basically a producer network. So, but however, if there is anything that you people would like to reach out to me, I can, you already have Nirmalya's number. We are in touch regularly. So I can pass on the information to him, or else, where do I write my email ID? Okay.
I think, yeah.
I'll just give you my personal email ID so that if any of you all would like to know more about it, you can please get in touch with me. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Eid Mubarak, and have a
Bye
wonderful
bye.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Eid Mubarak and bye.